Last week's dreadful episode put quite the downer on my expectations for this week's, so I put on the most critical hat possible for this episode. It looks like this. No, seriously, I went into this episode with a completely clear head. I may have had a bit of a stressful element to me whilst writing last week's review. That doesn't, however, change my opinion. I may have just been a little harsh on last week's episode. So anyway, I'm going to play that god-awful opening sequence I created for this series now because I've run out of things to chat about for an opening to this week's review.
Are you sitting comfortably? Then we'll begin.
The trailer for this week's episode really doesn't show this episode in a very good light. It looks really cheesy, and especially as we first saw it after last week's episode ended. Even when I found the video on iPlayer, this hideous promotional photo needs removing and redoing immediately. Why is his face so blue? When we jump into the episode, we are shown a really cool scenario of a submerged mining facility in Scotland. The dam has broken and flooded the surrounding area, which we'll probably see shown visually next week because we are amidst yet another two-parter story. I have had a look on the Wikipedia and I'm gonna guess that this is happening for the rest of the series, but I am really not looking forward to a two-parter with the Zygons, both parts written by that idiot who wrote Kill the Moon last year. The underwater station has recovered a craft of unknown origins. The group of... Wait, what exactly are they? Are they soldiers? Do they just help suck oil out of the ground? It's not exactly made clear, but I will say that one of the greatest strengths of the episode was the characters. It's great seeing good, well-developed characters deliver a story, as well as providing decent performances in a show that is renowned for killing off characters before we can give a shit about them. I will admit that the characters are rather stocky. We have a technician, the scientist, the leader, the deputy leader, the military dude, and the disgusting capitalist. These are quite alien-like roles, but I highly doubt this is the first time Doctor Who has taken on these roles in their stories, not to mention the countless other movies and TV shows that have done the same. The characters do some investigations on the interior of the ship and find some symbols. Whilst I was watching it, however, I thought they were just numbers. Look at them. 14, 41, 14 again. I really don't know what this last one is though. Anyway, the military guy gets incinerated and they all escape to the other room. I couldn't help but notice, however, when we zoom in on the map screen, it looks like this design was made on the same software that made the Dalek map. Another thing they ripped off from Alien is this oil company that looms over us very subtly, but I'm okay with it being there considering it's about oil, and it's hilarious to think that in 100 years time we are still reliant on oil as a resource. So the titles roll through and we see it's written by Toby Whitehouse, who wrote the school reunion episode back in 2006. The Doctor is then seen asking the TARDIS why she's unhappy, and it's hilariously well timed because we can hear Clara's nagging voice coming from within. Come on, Moffat, even the TARDIS doesn't like Clara. Then she asks to see monsters and things blowing up, and I would tell her to look no further than to go to the cinema and watch a Michael Bay movie. Fortunately, the Doctor ignores her complaints and begins asking the right questions regarding why they are there. When I first heard that we were going to be in an underwater base, I nearly expected a Bioshock-esque episode, but fortunately it's not quite like that, when we see that it's only a station and not an entire city of people living underwater. What I do commend the producers on is the set design for this episode. The base looks practical and unique. I love the painting in the communal area with the dragon wrapped around the ship, almost foreshadowing the dangers to follow. Just as they leave the dining area, Clara raises her hand for a high five and the Doctor just ignores it because he knows better. We see the two ghosts that spooked the living crew earlier, who then give the Doctor and Clara a sniff and then bugger off down the corridor. The Doctor and Clara then investigates the spaceship and see the symbols scratched on the inside. The episode keeps showing us these shots of the character's eyeball reflecting the symbols inside. It's not necessarily an issue because we as an audience understand that they have read the markings. However, it seems odd that they just use this shot so much in this episode. It's just quite distracting from the dialogue whenever it happens. The ghosts reappear and attempt to kill the two of them. Obviously it's not going to happen, but it's good that we have an understanding of their intentions without knowing much about the ghosts themselves. The Doctor states that Clara has a tendency to run her mouth, and once had an argument with Gandhi. This doesn't surprise me and it also confuses me. How can you argue with one of the most peaceful men in history? It's really cool seeing the ghosts float through the walls and floors. The CG looks pretty pretty good here and creeped me out a little when I thought they would just wander through the corridors. The Doctor and Clara reach the living crew members and we find the TARDIS was also unhappy because it wasn't able to translate sign language. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think it's a nice inclusion considering we haven't seen a deaf character on Doctor Who before. It's interesting, it's one of the only known physical languages, and even the TARDIS doesn't have an effective method of translating it to people like Clara. We find out that the ghost in a top hat is from another planet, cowardly in nature so it doesn't make sense for it to attack the crew. We also find out that they only come out at night, which seems like a trope, but I do hope there is a logical reason behind it, otherwise I can just call it out for its dramatic convenience. The crew return to the ship and the representative of Vector Petroleum proves his worthlessness by confusing valuable with powerful, and the Doctor rightfully pushes him aside. The Doctor then accepts that he is seeing ghosts, which is odd when you consider his logical and skeptical personality. I'm gonna guess we will open the stage curtain next week and reveal what's actually causing these apparitions to exist, because otherwise we would be watching unsolved mysteries instead of Doctor Who. We then have a truly brilliant moment when we see the Doctor and Clara exchanging what I like to call politeness cards. This part of the episode truly was a highlight and hilarious to watch, considering this Doctor basically has no filter or understanding of other people's feelings compared to the last two. Capaldi's delivery here is very amusing and deadpan, which is great, and Clara has finally done something to help situations like this instead of just complaining and moaning. Before we can have any more in-depth discussion, the computers go haywire and the TARDIS complains a bit more. I feel that putting the handbrake on the TARDIS was a bit of an anticlimax, considering the big build-up of music and tension that came beforehand. It also doesn't quite make sense either. Why would the TARDIS even need a handbrake? When has it ever just fucked off without the Doctor and his companions safe inside, unless he specifically instructed it to do so? You'd have thought the TARDIS would just stabilise itself even if the Doctor had forgotten to do so. We all know how renowned he is at cocking up where he's going and what time period he may be travelling to. We then have a nice little conversation between Clara and the Doctor about her well-being. I'm once again happy that she doesn't bitch or complain about the Doctor being too protective or anything, so the writer gets a big thumbs up from me for not making the same mistake as last season. Pritchard then gives up his search for the missing battery thing and gets an encounter with the ghosty ghoulies. This part of the episode is really well shot and edited in that we can't really see much of what is going on until the airlock opens and drowns him. This lack of understanding in what is being shown creates a lot of adrenaline for the audience, allowing for an edge of your seat effect before his untimely death. We have a really cool moment when Pritchard's body emerges and his ghost spooks the Clara and Science Man. The ghost picks up a chair and spookily walks towards them before Technician Girl then puts the base back into daylight mode and he disappears. However, after a discussion about abandoning the base, the Doctor puts it in quarantine and returns the base to night mode to find out more about the ghosts. When the plan to capture a ghost goes ahead, we see a really visually appealing and disturbing shot of the three ghosts hanging in position at different angles around the room. The design of the corridors looks really authentic and I appreciate the moss-like stains on the circular pillars too, as it feels more like they're underwater than just seeing the water from the inside. I do have a gripe with their plan, however, and that is why the characters need to swap over when they reach certain positions in the base.
They've separated.
This could have been prevented if you just used one person as bait. This sequence seems a little bit unoriginal too in comparison to other Doctor Who episodes. In the episode Dalek, for example, back in 2005, we have more bulkheads being sealed when Rose and Adam were being chased through the underground base. It is, however, tense, which is what was missing in the last two episodes, so we see yet another improvement that I really shouldn't be complaining about. Lund gets trapped inside one of the airlocks and the ghost picks up a wrench to hit him with it. When the ghost got really close to Lund's face, I thought they were going to kiss. That would have been interesting. Very interesting. When they try to establish contact with Lun again, we find that his name just sounds really stupid when said multiple times. The Doctor says it several times over and over again, and I can't help but laugh at it.
Lun, 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 lun.
Anyway, the ghosts get trapped in that chamber and we see the first use of the sonic sunglasses. Unfortunately, we don't know much about them, but so far he has used it as a webcam, and I think that's great. I hope we see how else it can be used in the duration of the rest of the series, otherwise it might as well be another cheap gimmick like the Fez with the last Doctor. In an interview with Moffat, he describes that the replacement of the sonic screwdriver was just a bit of fun. In this interview, you can also see that he just does not give a fuck about Doctor Who. The Doctor enters the chamber and I'm glad they used Cass to her full potential as a character. Deaf people are known for knowing how to lip read, and it's excellent that she uses this ability to recognise what the ghosts are mumbling, because up until this point I saw that they were moving their mouths uncontrollably and I wondered what it was all about. When we get back to the base, however, we have this really patronising segment where the Doctor gives all these characters little round balls that I can assume he just magicked out of thin air, just to explain Orion's belt. This character here is beaming because she just loves being treated like a child again. When questioned about whether the crew want to go home or not, I really must emphasise that these characters are written like actual people. They have enough development for me to really wonder what's going to happen to them next week, and I will feel sorry for any of them that die. When the submarine goes down, we see that it is controlled by means of realistic future technology. Just watching this guy driving the submarine really makes me want to see this device become a reality for video games or viewing experiences. These shots they've taken of the underwater village remind me a lot of that scene in Jaws that everybody jumps at, and I was expecting a jump scare throughout this segment of the episode. They dig up the suspended animation chamber and the Doctor retraces his steps to try and get some answers. We realise that the words carved into the spaceship work like a radio being played first thing in the morning, which is a great way of describing how these synaptic inscriptions work. Unfortunately, all of this interesting stuff has to be put on a hold until next week and the base starts flooding. I'm hoping we find out more about this oil company too next week, because they sound like the true bad guys at the moment, considering they have control over the entire base with their computer software. Oh, meddling with our computer programs, are you? Well then, we might as well flood you all, in case you know just a bit too much about our company. They sprint to the TARDIS and the Doctor travels back in time to stop the spaceship, and Clara hangs out in the communal area with the captain and translator. However, before anything else can be said, the Doctor's ghost appears in the water. I did kinda see this coming as soon as they saw something in the water, but I really didn't expect the reveal of the Doctor as an eyeless ghost to be quite that terrifying. Okay, granted it's not nightmare worthy, but I was shocked at the sight of it, really, as I would with any of the other characters. Except perhaps Clara. So, did it suck? Well, I have to say this series has been quite a mixed bag so far, and this episode has certainly entertained me and surprised me. I give this episode an 8 out of 10 because the story is intriguing, the characters are grand, and it looks like the writer actually gave a damn about what he was writing. I think there are parts that could have been rethought or removed, but this episode was great and I can't wait to find out what happens next week. What happens? What happens next week? We then see the two ghosts that spooked the oh my Jesus Christ. We have more bulkheads being sealed when Rose and Adam were, oh my god, Adam were, by means of realistic future technology. Fuck's sake. When the submarine goes down, we see that it is controlled by means of realistic, oh my god, I can't fucking say this line.